Hello everyone and welcome back to Age of Nagash, which is a channel dedicated to Age of Sigmar. And in this video we are going to be continuing my Why Play series by talking about why play Living City as part of the Cities of Sigmar. Of course this is going to be reviewing a sub-legion, so it'll be a bit different. But the nice thing about it is means we can get a little bit more in depth about the inner workings of a certain part of a larger army. So what I also want to say, joining me in this video, is I have got two guests who I've had the pleasure of fighting them both on my Discord, and it's going to be Luc and Alex. So how are you doing today, sirs?
Yeah, doing alright, man. Thank you. Yeah, pretty good. Stayed in, kept away from the snow. All good.
Brilliant. I didn't even know you had snow. I live in the same country. No snow down here, just rain. Lots and lots of rain to the point where it probably freeze tomorrow. I mean, that can't drive anywhere. But what I'd also like to say with this is I know that Luc and Alex play Living City, and I know they're personally collecting it as well. So I asked them to join me for a why play, and they kindly said yes. So if you guys would like to join the Discord at any point, and I am going to cover a lot of why plays now going forward with all the sub-legions. There's probably about 80 out there maybe. Feel free to join the Discord, and if I'll be covering a sub-legions that you want to join me in, let me know and maybe we can get that arranged. So just before we're going to go into the video, I do want to do a shout out to my patrons, as because of them I can continue to make these videos. So that's going to be to my Morgasts, so that's Sandback, Johnathan H and Fliq, my Vampires, Mir, Martin S, Rouse321, Max T, David A, and my Necromancers of course, Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, WolfNick, Michal W and Quad. Thank you so much for your support, guys. If you'd like to support me on Patreon, check out the link at the top of the description down below. But if you can't do that, make sure you hit the like button if you are enjoying this video. Right, so with all the preamble out of the way, let us get on with the Living City. So the first thing we always do in these videos is we talk about the lore, and then we go over the strengths and weaknesses of the army, and hopefully by the end of it, it's going to answer your question of, is this an army you would like to play? The nice thing about it being a sub-allegiance is that you may already have the models for Cities of Sigmar, and you're just wondering which sub-allegiance should you pick. But if not, hopefully we'll win you over by the end of it, or vice versa. Maybe you'll find out this is an army for you as long as you learn something. So my first question then is going to be about the lore, and I'll be asking you guys quite a bit, as you guys will know more than I do. So what is the Living City? And I'm going to throw this one over to Alex.
Yeah, so Living City is pretty much the capital of Gairan, as we'd sort of be led to believe. It was founded by L'Oreal, who is Queen of the Sylvaneth, those who don't know, as kind of a thank you to Sigmar after the Roundgate Wars, I believe. And yeah, basically it's sort of a big living city which is tended to by the Sylvaneth. So the Sylvaneth and free people kind of all live in harmony there, and it's basically just like a big living city. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
I'd like to think of it sort of like the sort of tree city you see in Lord of the Rings when they turn up in, is it Lothlorien?
Lothlorien. I was like
that kind of imagery of like living in the trees and everything's made out of the sort of surroundings and everything.
Yeah, it's quite nice. So like, what I understand about it, I only know a little bit, but I've been playing Age of Sigmar long enough to fight in the as soon as I say this I forget the name. I think Season of War it was called, or Season of Hope. I think Season of War, where basically as a result of this big global campaign in Age of Sigmar, it spawned these cities of Sigmar, and the Living City I believe was the first one. And how it was created is basically Alarielle planted some seeds. Some massive trees grew out the ground when she did. The shape of rocks reformed and everything. So it's almost made this like city above the ground as part of it. And if you guys are wondering, like, let's say you don't really know much about Age of Sigmar and you're quite new, the Living Cities is something that Luc has done a good comparison to, where it's kind of like your Wood Elves sort of aesthetic, with that one as sort of a basic feel to it. But yeah, so that is pretty much the Living Cities. I will do more of a lore in-depth sort of video on it, but in the meantime, if you'd like to know more, I know that 2 Plus Tough has done a cracking video on that, so go check out Doug's video for that one. But like we say, this is more of a summary of the lore. So then going on to my next question for both of you is why did you choose this army? And I'm going to throw this one over to yourself, Luke.
So I was looking for a newer Age of Sigmar army. I've done a couple of Death Forces, played around with getting used to the system. But I used to collect a lot of Warhammer Fantasy back when I was a lot younger. I was a Bretonnia player, so that was thrown out the window. But I liked the Empire and the border side of things. So I was drawn to the cities of Sigmar because it allowed me to bring out a lot of the good elements from the original Warhammer Fantasy and bring them forward into the new game. So I was playing around with a couple of sort of cities, trying to make something with the Dark Elves. But I just didn't really find sort of a good narrative way of running it. I kept trying to focus on one particular sort of element rather than meshing different things together. And I was reading through the book and really liked the idea of sort of being able to work with the Sylvaneth and the Wood Elves and all that stuff. Ironically, the list I'm running now has neither Wood Elves or Sylvaneth in it, but
that's not the point.
That was just a product of came out at the end. But yeah, it was just I got drawn in by sort of its imagery and the lore and everything, and then we'll get round to sort of how it plays and everything in a minute. But it just plays. It has a really nice fluid way that it plays. Allows for some shenanigans.
It has plenty of shenanigans. I know, like, for myself, I don't personally play Cities of Sigmar, and I don't play the Living City. I've played against it a few times, obviously, including against you guys. But I know it's the one I have looked into. If I was to do Cities of Sigmar at some point in the future, it would be the Living City. I do like Anvilgard because I like the Dark Elf aesthetic, but my favourite elves would have to be Wood Elves. So I do really like that vibe. And growing up in the countryside in England, I like the old classic oak tree feel and stuff. Feels very homely. So that's why I'd like it. But going on to yourself then, Alex, what has drawn you to the conclusion of why you chose to play and collect the Living City?
Yeah, so I basically started off with Age of Sigmar collecting Sylvaneth. And I probably got to, just under 1,000 points of them. And I was kind of like, as much as I like these models, there's so many other, amazing models in Age of Sigmar that I want to paint. And I don't just want to be limited to this one army. So I kind of started looking around and stumbled upon Living City. And like the fact that you can take Sylvaneth as part of your army, but you can also take the entire of the Cities of Sigmar books. That's, men, dwarves and elves. And you can take Stormcast as well. It just means that it just meant from like a hobby point of view, which is obviously a big aspect of the game. You don't get bored. You're not painting the same thing over and over again. Like every single unit you paint is like slightly different, and you're learning something a bit different. And then that was kind of from the hobby aspect. And then when it came to playing it, it's just really. I love how it plays. It's very reactive. I very rarely go into a game with a plan. It's more I see what my opponent does and then I react. So it's it's great in that sense. And it's just every game's different. You're not having to follow a set game plan, which I love.
Yeah, and that is that's great because it really stops your games becoming a bit mundane and everything like that. And the fact of and this is something we're going to get into in a moment, but it's such a deep book that there's so much things you can do to shake it up. There's also like we've mentioned, it's very metropolitan in the sense of you can also take stuff from the Stormcast book, take stuff from the Sylvaneth book, and you've also got your allies as well. There's so much you can do with this, right? And that I'm going to lead us on to the next question because it's going to bring up a lot of those points, which is what are the strengths of this army off the table? So with things like that, and I know a lot of people don't really talk about this much from what I've seen online. Most people sort of focus in-game, but when I bring up this question, it's very much about moving on the collecting side of you're going to spend more time probably collecting, building and painting these guys than you are playing. For most people, that's just the reality. So you have to do an army that you like the models of. There's no point doing an army that you really love the rules, but you don't like the models. You're probably, unless you're going to convert it all up, you're just not going to do it. So I would say one of the strengths to kick us off is that it's got an absolutely huge model range, to the point of, if it's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest. What else would you guys say to that? Who wants to take this one?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, as you say, the roster that they have to pull from is ludicrous. And what I think is quite nice is within that roster, you get so many different types of units. So you've got your small class, your Silvernet, your pre-guild men, your dwarves, your elves of both wood elves, high elves, dark elves. And sort of moving on to the painting side of it is trying to come up with a paint scheme that ties such different looking units together to make it look like a cohesive army. It's a lot of fun on that side of things, trying to think, well, okay, these are the base colors I'm going to use, but how does that work on, some Phoenix Guard armor next to a unit of Iron Breakers or Iron Drakes? Very different style of armor, very different patterns and flows to it. How do you tie that all together? And it's great fun to sort of try and sit there and work that out. It presents a nice challenge, which I think sometimes with some armies, once you've worked out your paint scheme, that's kind of it. You go slog your way through the models, and even if it's a paint scheme you enjoy, after painting 60 odd skinks or something, you're gonna get bored.
Yeah, and that, unless you're like one of the odd, you're gonna find that a bit of a challenge. So yeah, you have all that flexibility in painting styles to just keep things interesting and fresh. I mean, like I say, I don't collect the army, but I collect every Death Army and also Slaves of Darkness, and slowly building Imperial Knights. Sounds very off topic, but the point I'm going to make up is that I've recently, for example, been painting a lot of Slaves of Darkness, but it gets to a point where I've been painting the same colour scheme too much now. I have to move on to one of my other armies to just break it up and keep the motivation going, so I don't stop painting. Whereas in this army, because you have so many different aesthetic in the models and everything else, it just gives you that variety that you don't get completely bored of the army and need to switch or something like that. So it is good for motivation. So yeah, I think that's a good point. And what about yourself, Alex? What would you say is a strength of these guys off the table?
I definitely agree with everything said. Just looking at my shelf now, and the variety of different model types and colours is huge. But I'd say also narratively you can really have fun. This isn't just like a Living City thing; it's a Cities of Sigmar thing. But just because you're using the Living City rule does not mean that your city has to be Living City. If you want to create your own story and your own colour scheme, I think Cities of Sigmar is one of the best books for it, because you can have your city based anywhere, doing anything. And as long as you sort of tune your city to be a bit ambushy and that kind of thing, like Living City, then run it as that. And you have a whole story, a whole set of characters. You've got so many old Warhammer Fantasy characters which are no longer generally in use, which you can bring in and sort of make your army your own. The levels of conversions you see, especially on cities, is incredible. People have, although it's very difficult to create like a functional, say, just Wood Elf army, like when you can run sort of proxies of different things, you can have, so you can have, I don't know how to say, like the old Wood Elf dragon as a dark dragon, for example, as a black dragon, for example. Mm-hmm. So there's just great hobbying opportunities all over the place. It's not just the different paint schemes, it's the narrative, it's the conversions. It's just great all around.
I know what you mean. Like if you had like from the old Dark Elves, a Dreadlord on Black Dragon, or wherever it's called now, may still be called the same thing. I doubt every Black Dragon in Age of Sigmar looks the same. It depends, it could be completely different. You can really let your imagination go wild. Something I would really like to do, but I just don't do the army, so I have no reason to. I'd love to get the Adeptus Mechanica stuff from 40k. To make some cool Pistoliers. You know, the guys
Yeah.
riding the like mechanical dogs and stuff. I mean,
Definitely.
expensive, but like would be very cool.
Yeah.
Which I think is great, but that's only just like scratching the top of the surface. There's loads and loads of stuff you really could do with.
Oh,
this.
there's Max in the Discord who's I think his Hammerhall army is entirely based off of Chaos Knights, and that's his demigryphs. He's converted all of them like that. It's things like that are just amazing. You can go wild with your imagination.
Yeah, and I really think like I was just going to say that this is a massive rabbit hole where me, Alex, and you, Luke, we could talk about just the conversion opportunities of not just cities of Sigmar, but just live-in cities for probably, no doubt, the evening or 2 hours or something. I have no doubt with that. And to be honest, I think that, you know, maybe a future video could be interesting conversion ideas for different armies. I think could be something quite fun we could do. But no, I've seen, I mean, I know this isn't Live-in City, but I've seen Ben Johnson, who's well known for being like a headlight rules writer, I believe it is in Age of Sigmar. I've played haven't played against his army, sorry, but I played next to his army at a tournament, and he went all steam tanks, and like one of them is combined with a Kaladin Overlord's airship. So then it's like the commander one that's flying. There's loads of beautiful things. I know Anthony from the Air West coach, who I've done some videos with, when I talked about why play Cities of Sigmar, he's done loads of conversion work in his army. Like, it's a it really is a hobbyist dream, because there'll be some things in the army, and you know we all like different models, but there'll be some things in the army that you may see and go, I really want to run these guys, I like their lore, I like their rules, but just not feeling the models. There's so many people who have just like made their own models through kit bashing and stuff, etc. And as long as you just let your opponents know what they are, it's absolutely fine. So yeah, there's loads we can do with that. And what I would say, just to end this sort of one as well, like strengths off the table, how beginner friendly is it?
I mean, there's two sides to that. I mean, building wise, because the models are so old, like I'm sure this will lead into a weakness that the sculpts are quite old, but as far as they go, most of the sculpts for your Cities of Sigmar stuff are quite easy to build. And something I'm sure Alex will probably agree with me, you know, you look at the price of some of the new armies, a unit of 10 free guild spear sort of guard is £17.50 in the UK. It's certainly one of the, if you're looking at some of the more baseline infantry and even some of the sort of baseline heroes for cities, it's certainly one of the probably cheaper armies to collect if you want to make it that way.
Yeah, for sure. I think because the models are older, they sometimes lack that sort of detail of some of the new models. So for me, it was my first army I painted, and while it was a huge learning curve, if I look at what I painted at the start compared to the end, you know, there's obviously going to be a difference. But yeah, certainly for a beginner, it would be a very good army to learn to paint with.
That's cool. That's good to hear. And just one more question to say with that. Talking about, obviously we can get into rules later and stuff, but there are 2 start collecting boxes for Cities of Sigmar, if I'm not mistaken. You've got the one with the essentially dispossessed units in, and then you've got the one which is the like Anvil Guard units, the Pirateers and stuff. Are either of those boxes any good for Living Cities? And I know you can put whatever models from those boxes into Living City as much as you like. It's your hobby. Do what you want. But on a sort of realistic, do they play well in Living Cities? Because I imagine naturally people will ask, I'm thinking about starting this army. Here's a start collecting box. Should I buy it?
Yeah, like I think the Anvil Guard one just wouldn't really work with, like, you get like the Hydra and things like that. It wouldn't really work what you're trying to do with Living City. But there's definitely play with the Dwarvish one, because you can get them as either Iron Breakers or Iron Drakes as your infantry. Iron Breakers are just good solid infantry. Iron Drakes, you know, if you have, as we'll go into later, but deep striking Iron Drakes are scary. There's always room in a Cities of Sigmar list for a gyrocopter flying around being annoying. And I believe you get a Warden King, who is a great, if you're going mostly dispossessed in your list, or you've got a large block of dispossessed, then a Warden King is always useful. And I think you get a Cogsmith, which, granted, you wouldn't ever use, but the rest of it would definitely make it worthwhile if you wanted to go fairly dwarf heavy.
Yes, exactly. It's a good thing you said dwarf there. So what I just want to let people know, like the reason why we're talking a bit more in detail with the living cities, because I presume you've watched the Why Play Sigmar video, but just in case you haven't and you're very new to this, Dispossessor, you're like your standard fantasy dwarfs from the world that was. Your Empire stuff is mainly free people, and then your Wood Elves is what's called Wanderers now, and then your then the High Elves and the Dark Elves are a little bit different because they break into lots of different ones. But that's just to give you a bit of an idea of how it works. But no, I think it's a good point you made there, Alex, with that. So going into the next bit, which is what are their weaknesses off the table? Because although we try and not look at things always in a bad way on this channel, we do, of course, have to be honest when we're talking about, especially armies, of like why to play them. We're not just all going to say good things. We're going to give you the negative sides of the army as well, so you know maybe if it's an army that's not for you. So what are the weaknesses of the army? I know it's already been mentioned, but I'll have to say it. The model range of the army. Now, if you think about like, this is all the old dwarf units and empire units and everything else, quite a lot of those old resin units were scrapped, so it's mainly plastic, right? That's in Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I haven't come across any yet.
Cool.
I think some of the really old Dark Elf stuff, like the Drakespawn Knights, might be fine cast. I think
they're plastic because I've seen them
are
in
they
the store.
plastic?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. In that case, yeah, I think actually everything is plastic. Yeah.
Yeah, they are. They are all plastic.
But that's one thing.
Yeah, like I think the Free Guild stuff's definitely starting to show its age a little bit. But like a lot of the dwarf stuff is actually, I think it came at the end of Fantasy, so that's pretty good. The Wood Elf stuff's pretty good. So yeah, like in general, unless you're going like solely Free Guild heavy, like most of the sculpts I'd say hold up pretty well to today's standards.
That's good then.
I think sort of this, while the sculpts, some look slightly dated and stuff. Something I will say is posability of the models is also certainly an issue.
Yeah, it's very rank and file.
The arms can be very movable, but after that, if you want to make them look very different, you're gonna have to do a lot of chopping and a lot of sculpting yourself.
Yeah. Like
I'd say
very rank and file, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say
it used to have to be blocks of basically movement trays, square movement trays for these models. So there's only so much I could do.
I'd say like the places, particularly where the Cities of Sigmar sculpts don't hold up, is in their big monsters. For example, I've got the Phoenix sat next to me now, and I just the Phoenix itself is beautiful, but just how upright the elf set on top can look a bit sort of out of place. And again, like while the Black Dragon for its time is amazing, when you compare it to sort of what there is now, they definitely have shown their age a bit. And when they're your big centerpieces, they can sometimes look not as great as some of the other armies out there with their big brand new centerpieces, but it is what it is.
And I think leading on from talking about brand new centerpieces and stuff, certainly a weakness or a down point for this army is it's possible, but I would be very surprised to see new models coming for this army.
Yeah.
It very much feels like an army for those. I mean, obviously there'll be new players who come to it and stuff, but it does kind of feel like a little bit of a nod for those who used to collect fantasy and still want to use some of those models. So I'm happy to be proven wrong in the future, but I can't see us getting a lot of new models for this army.
I think almost the maximum we would see, and again I'm happy to be wrong, but maybe a small foot hero for each of the cities.
Yeah, and that'd be amazing. I would happily take just that.
Yeah, but other than that, I wouldn't see much. What I will say though is some of the models have held up quite well, and I'm not gonna lie, like some of the models are too old. Like one of the things that put me off the army personally was I just rather have new sculpts because I've been painting and building a lot of older death sculpts. So if I was doing a new army, I'd want it to be a new army. So and not have to do all the mold lines, which I'm sure Cities of Sigmar suffer with a little bit. But But I think this also what I think it was yourself, Alex, hopefully, who said this earlier, was it's quite good if you're new though, because then you haven't got all the intricacies of all the little bits of detail and stuff you'll get like on the new Lumineth as an example, or on the new Sinesh that are going to come out.
I am desperate for that Slanesh, but I am scared of that painting process.
Yeah, there's a...
I never want to paint skin.
No, exactly. But no, so I think those are the weaknesses off the table. Models, a large amount of the models are don't compare to the newer sculpts we see, because, you know, their rank and file sort of positioned, or the models just look a bit older. And then we're just not sure if they're going to get like any updated models. I would say for the meantime, you know, they're safe. Games Workshop gave them a battle tome. That was kind of a nod to say that we're not going to scrap this army completely. But
I'd go one step further than that, because in many ways, Cities of Sigmar is the thing which captures our imagination, I feel, within the lore. Like, it's very hard to sort of understand, you know, what Big Marathi is doing in the Marathi book, and it's very hard to empathise with her. Whereas when you're hearing the story of a poor Free Guild handgunner facing off against all the horrors that is in the Age of Sigmar, it really it captures the imagination a lot more. So I do think it will continue to be supported by Games Workshop in terms of narratively and in terms of rules. I just think models, they might not.
I think that's a good point. I think it's very true. I mean, like, if we're talking about like what can I relate to, a demigod being a Stormcast Eternal is not really something I can really connect to. Like, you know, like, don't you just hate it, you know, some days when you struggle to lift up more than one horse, you know, with both your arms sort of situation. I'm much more likely to be, you know, the person who farms, you know, I don't know, 21 hours a day, sleeps 3 hours a day. Hopefully today isn't the day that the beasts of chaos come knocking at your door and murder you in your sleep. So
I do have one final point sort of about the models though, sort of thinking to myself, whilst I don't think we're going to get sort of more rank and file updated models for this, we do have Warhammer the Old World coming in the sort of relatively close future, so there is potential for proxying across from there.
It's true. I still reckon for that, I mean, that's a whole conversation itself. But I think what they'll be, I reckon it'll be square based again, but they'll just make movement trays for turning circle based miniatures into square movement trays. So you just slot them in, and then it just means you can use both of them. But yeah, that's a good point. And I will say, some of these rank and file models, as soon as you stick them on a round base, like if I look at, what have I got, looking at my cabinet, Chaos Warriors, again, the complete opposite to Cities of Sigmar, but stick them on a round base, and, you know, just try and like move their arms just a little bit out so their weapons are a little bit differently positioned, and it makes them look a lot better. I think it was the square base that really makes them look like dated, I'll say. But anyway, so I think that's enough for that one. I just want to also say, I know you've already mentioned it. I was going to say, what about price? But no, we've covered it. Compared to especially some of the new armies, the prices aren't too bad. Right, so now into the big juicy part of this video, which I'm sure a lot of people want to hear, is what are their strengths of the Living City on the table? How do they play? And interestingly, you both have played sort of like different city lists. Like, I know yourself, Luke, you've gone for sort of a Stormcast, like not allies, not reinforcements, but just basically some Stormcast elements in your list. And I know yourself, Alex, you've gone for you've tried out a few different ones. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Luke, you tell us like how your army plays, or how, when you read this book and your experiences as a whole of this army, what you think its strengths are on the table, and then I'll move the question over to Alex, or Alex, if you want to take over at any point, feel free.
Yeah, so I go for a very more sort of shooting aspect to the army. One of their sort of their command ability that a lot of people, and I'm sure Alex will bring up as well, is strike and then melt away. which is all about shooting and moving. The title would suggest that you shoot and run away, but I don't always use it that way. In fact, on the whole, I tend to use it in completely the opposite direction. Shoot and run straight towards you. But yeah, no, I take a very shooty list, so I run 2 units of 3-guild handgunners, 2 units of mandrakes. I then also bring in Fulminators and Celestial Prime, who also have shooting and a shooting ability. So I really like to focus more on the shooting aspect and get rid of what I can far away, focus down enemy characters, shooting them before I charge in. I mean, I have a good base solid line of 30 Phoenix Guard to sit on whatever objective I need to really hold, and they're probably not going to get shifted. I don't really go down the magic route, and I know, Alex, you use a bit more of the magic than I do. And I know it's certainly something I'm considering looking into. One of the nice things about this is you can have your baseline force you tend to use, but then you can add different elements, and just changing out a couple of units will completely change how you play, but it's still the same city. So there's a lot of development there. But yeah, no, so I tend to go for a far more shooting focus in my force, magic or melee. I have some melee, and one can hit usually dies, but definitely try and focus down with far away shooting as and when I can.
No, that's great, yeah. And then Alex, what about yourself? So Luke's already hinted towards you use a bit of magic in your arm. What's your sort of ideas of their sort of strengths on the table then, the Cities of Sigmar? What are your takes on it?
Yeah, so Living City, it's all about movement. You don't have kind of often the hitting power of some of the other cities, but what you have is you have really incredible movement. So the combination of 2 of your rules, which is you can deep strike in Living City. So basically up to half of your army can deploy off the board, and then you can bring them on within 6 inches of a table edge and 9 inches away from the enemy. That's pretty common across Age of Sigmar. Like most books has some kind of deep striking stuff. What makes Living City really good is what Luke's already mentioned, is the strike and melt away. The reason being is that when you teleport in with a combat unit, you're having to get a 9-inch charge, which is pretty unlikely. Like if you're relying on that, you're probably going wrong in your tactics. However, with the ability to shoot and move, if you can get a really heavy combat unit like Fulminators, the Draconian Cavalry, which Luke uses a lot, you can shoot, you can then move them to just outside of 3 inches from what they want to charge, and so you guarantee the charge. So that's one way you can use the ability. I personally do use it the way it's worded, so strike and melt away. My first thing I put into my list is Jacq.l out of Sylvaneth.
Yep.
The reason being is that her shooting tack is really good. So it's 20 shots, and basically 6s do mortal wounds. So you've got a good chance of doing, let's say, 4 mortal wounds on the shot. Because she's got an 18-inch range, what you can basically do is you can shoot at what you want, and then you can move her 9 inches away from the enemy. That way, she's basically got a 27-inch set range, we'll say. So nothing's going to come and get her. And you just do that all game with her, while the rest of your army does what they're doing, and you're just chipping away. Over 5 turns, you're talking about, 15, 20, if you're having a good game, 25 mortal wounds alone coming out of Jacq.l before you take into account the other stuff that goes through. So she's really important for my list. The other really worthwhile trait that falls within Living City is every multi-wound model in your hero phase can heal 1 wound. The reason that's important is I always run the Phoenix. So for those that don't know, the base on the Phoenix is a 4-up save with a 4-up after save. So it's already really strong. That 4-up after save is huge. There is a command trait called Iron Ocarsa, which adds 1 to save rolls. So you've now got it on 3-up, 4-up. It then has an ability where if any spell goes off within 12 inches, it gets another +1 to its save. So now it's on a 2-up, 4-up. You can see where this is going, and you've got spells within the lore which can make it -1 to hit, -1 to wound. So you can basically have an indestructible bird, and to top it off, it comes back to life on a 4-up when it dies, full wounds. So having that as like a huge distraction piece is great.
Yeah.
So they're kind of go on.
Sorry, I was going to say just about that Phoenix in the game I had against you. In a single turn, I chucked something along the lines of something like 36 attacks -1 rend, 2 damage each, and I made you have to save against every single one of those because my bust was so good. And I think you took maybe 4 damage, something like that. Yeah,
and then
there
is a build where I mentioned with the healing. So because Living City comes from Gairan, the realm artifact for Gairan, I can't remember. Oh, the Everspring Diadem, it's called, and that heals 1 wound. So potentially your Phoenix is healing 2 wounds every turn, as well as being probably the most defensive model in the game. Like, don't get me wrong, it doesn't put a lot of damage out. It does some work, but just for something to hold that big scary unit that your opponent has in place, and it take 3 turns to chew through it. It's great.
Yeah, and it's fast, right? And it can fly, and it's a
it's got a 16-inch movement, and the really nice thing, which is better than its attacks, is at full bracket, it chooses 1 model that it flies across, and on a 2-up, it does 5 mortal wounds. Now, if you can get that to go across a little hero, for example, that's that hero dead in 1 shot. Or just put it into a unit, and its actual attacks are fine. It's not there to do lots of damage in combat. It's there to survive and be annoying, basically.
No, I think that's it just shows and for example, this is just 1 unit in a book of, I'm not going to pick a number, I don't know, 50 units, where you can show just how
more than that when you take into account Stormcast and Sylvaner.
Exactly. And think about in that game I just mentioned about my Vanguard charging a Phoenix, like Drycha came in and did some nice damage to Be'lakor, just like off the table. And I think what works well there, and it's going to be the same with you, Luke, as well, like when you use your Fulminators, is because you're guaranteed, if you've got the command point, to basically come off from the board edge, shoot, and then move, and then charge. So, unless I have a fight first ability, you can dictate when you're, even if it's a fragile unit coming on from the board edge, you can dictate to make sure it will fight first.
Yeah. And there's actually a really nice combo with that as well. So depending on what you're doing, one of the artifacts is the Spear of the Hunt, which increases one of the bearer's melee weapons rend by 1, but really importantly, when it charges, it fights first. So potentially, if you've got a hero deep striking off, say, a black dragon with a crossbow and a spear, you can have both your black dragon and, say, you're taking fulminators, both of them charging in from the edge of the board, and they would both get to fight before your opponent does, because the dragon fights at the start of the combat phase, and then your fulminators would be your first pick. So you can do serious damage without your opponent having any chance of answering back.
Yeah, and you're basically deleting what you're really wanting to focus down there.
Yeah.
You're getting very good chances of doing an awful lot of damage, particularly if you're doing that shooting attack first as well.
Yeah, I know. Like when you've used your shooting attack against me, for example, it's just the mortal wounds alone just got rid of Be'lakor. So it's not just like I'm using the shooting just to move. It's obviously the shooting attack that can do a lot of damage. So what I'm hearing is this is very much about movement, this sub-allegiance, and I think that's one of the reasons I really like it as well. I said I really like the aesthetic of Wood Elves, but the amount of times I say on this channel, probably in every video I've mentioned that you win the game on movement. It's not, as much as you can pick up combat and shooting as much as you want, but the game has moved on, the game has won on movement, because it's all about getting to the objectives and being in the right positions, model placement, and everything else. And Living Cities does movement extremely well, right? Because we've just said you can deep strike, right? That's one thing. You can deep strike behind the enemy if you want, just so you hold you within 6 inches of the board edge, 9 inches away from the enemy. But if you also had if you had your fulminators, they move 10 inches?
Yeah.
So they move 10 inches, right? they shoot, and then they can move again, and then they can charge. So they can move 20 inches. If you didn't... Pardon?
I just said exactly.
Yeah. And my other question, what came to me in my head, and I'm going to ask you guys, is does this, and I haven't seen either of you use it against me, doesn't mean you haven't done it, but just for myself personally, would you put the cogs in your army? Because then your fulminators, as the example, are the +2 to their movement, right, with that. So they're moving 24 inches, and then they're charging 2d6 +2.
The issue that I've always found with cogs is that your opponent, especially with movement, your opponent can use it against you as well. And often cities, armies can, certainly the stuff that's deep striking can be quite squishy if you're not careful. So if you're giving them that extra bit of movement to get into you well, I think it can be trouble. And generally when you're deep striking, say with fulminators, their shooting attacks are 12-inch range. So you don't need that extra movement because you're moving to within 3 inches of what you've shot. Maybe after that, cogs could work if you've blown that unit out of the water. But generally, because of deep striking and getting exactly where you want to be, you then don't need any more movement after that. I'd say.
And I'll certainly say I know I need to have a little bit more look into the magic side of it all, because it's not something I focus on, so I've not really looked that much into endless spells and stuff. But I think if I was going down that route, then I'd be more inclined to focus on is it Life Surge?
Emerald Life Swarm? Is it?
So there's Life Surge, which is the Living City in the Living City spell lore, and you've got the Emerald Life Swarm, which is the end of spell.
What I do, the spell laws and everything else, we will go through them in this video, and I'll read throughout, because there's not too many spells, artifacts, command traits, blah blah blah, and you can tell me your real thoughts on them. But what you were talking about, the endless spell, though, weren't you, Luke?
Yeah, I was talking about the endless spell, and I could just see, sort of going back to that idea of the taking the Gairan relic, just really being able to focus down on really ensuring that a lot of your stuff that might be squishy can get more heals back onto the unit and such, would not go amiss.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite common knowledge at this stage, but Emerald Life Swarm with Phoenix Guard, which both me and Luke run, is bonkers. Phoenix Guard 4 up, so they're essentially 2 models per 1 model when you think about it, compared to other infantry. And the fact that because in cities all spells are empowered, you're bringing back D6 models rather than D3. So if you roll well, you're bringing back what would it be, 90 points of Phoenix Guard for a 50-point spell, and that's just in 1 turn. So yeah, Emerald Life Swarm's really strong. I've had really good success running the Everblaze Comet, which actually is a Stormcast Eternal spell. For those that don't know, it's got a 36-inch range, so you can cast it outside of Dispel range, and basically everything within 10 inches of where it lands takes mortal wounds. That's great because cities is generally a high drop army, because the battalions, especially the Living City battalion, is pretty bad. We'll be honest.
So
this will be we're going to it as a weakness, but it makes your opponent really think. Well, do I turn 1? Do I want to give him turn 1 when potentially I'm having 20 mortal wounds coming out of that comet? And just everything you can do to make your opponent think and question their decisions is really good.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, even just the basic thing you get, right, where it's everything in your army that's going to kill me is off the board, right? So it's so it makes me as the opponent have to think about where you're going to come on, and then have to try and deal that threat after you've hit me with that one. And especially if I don't have screening capability much in my army, it's something I'll struggle with. But we'll get into that when we actually we'll read the rules out for that. I think that's good for strengths at the moment, unless there's anything else someone would like to mention.
Don't think so. I think that covers it pretty well without going too much more into detail.
Yeah, and like when we read through the rules, it'll probably something else might come up. So then when we go into the weaknesses of the army on the table, so and these can be things like what do they struggle at? So what mechanics of the game do they struggle at, and also do they have like certain bad matchups that you guys can think of?
I can certainly. Oh, go on, you go, Luke.
I was just going to jump in with the one that we discussed before we started this, which is the battle plan of total commitment.
Yes, very true.
Very, very bad matchup. It doesn't matter who you're playing against, because if you're having to put everything on the table when you're wanting to bring half your army off the table, you're having to play a completely different game at that point.
Yes, you have to think on the fly. So like. With total commitment, where you can't deploy anything off the board, you're going to have to think especially if you're like me and quite a few other people who are playing as well, where unless you're practicing for a certain event, you will probably just roll randomly to see what battle plan you get from the General's Handbook or the core rulebook, and you could land on total commitment, and then you have to try and think of a strategy of how you would play your army. If you couldn't bring things on from the board edge, essentially. And I think that's kind of a problem you face once you've started collecting the army. I think with that one, because you can get around it. I mean, like, I know it's not ideal, but like I said, you can make your fulminators move, 20 inches if you wanted to, so they could do a turn one charge if they wanted. And there are... your movement is still great without the teleporting on from the board edge, right?
Yeah.
So that is that. What other sort of weaknesses would you think there is in the army?
So one that I'd say, while the command traits and artifacts are generally good, they are very based around making your general and heroes better, and they are less focused on making your other units better. So in some of the other cities, you might get like +1 to wound, you might get a battle shock immunity bubble, you might get reroll hits of 1 in some cities. You don't really get any of that in the Cities of Sigmar, in Living City. So like Cities of Sigmar is very much like a power pairs army anyway. So like you might have a dwarvish hero with like some dwarvish infantry, you might have like an elvish hero with some elvish archers, and that they're buffing each other. But in most of the other cities, they do have a more general buff that you can get through the artifacts, whereas in Living City, you don't really get that.
I like to compare playing Cities of Sigmar to playing the world's worst game of Happy Families. You're constantly trying to pair up different things that you need to buff the different things, but they're not necessarily going to work with the other units around you.
There is a lot of real life, comparisons you can put towards this. But I think one of the sort of feeling I've got, and you can sort of tell me if I've got it wrong, but Living Cities, I'm not saying they're the top army, because I'll just say they're not. Go play Seraphon and enjoy that if you want, but they don't have loads of inherent weaknesses. Like they're quite a flexible army because they have so much unit variety. There's nothing that they're particularly too bad at. Is that a fair point to say, or am I getting that wrong?
No, for sure. Like, I mean, I would definitely go so in Living City anyway. They are jack of all trades, masters of none. You've got stuff that do really good work. So like Phoenix Guard are a really good anvil. Fulminators coming on from the edge of the board are like one of the best hammers in the game. But they're not leading the way in any particular thing. It's kind of it's balancing everything together in a list.
No, that's fair. And cool. So with that, just trying to find a good sort of like point to put it in, I am going to go through the rules we have for the army. So there's not too many, like I mentioned, for the Living City. So I also have this picture up on the screen for you guys who are watching. So apologies if it's a bit pixelated or something. The picture will just be taken from my phone. So just bear with that. But we will, like I say, be reading through it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read through the battle traits. So that involve the the Viriade shield. I'll go through the command traits and the artifacts and the spells. So, starting with the battle traits. So, the first thing it says is that your city must be from Gairan, because it's obviously the living city there. You can make up your own for lore purposes, but in game terms, it's from Gairan. But really, was more of a big deal when this book first came out because there was more to do with the realms. But now what that means is if you want to take an artifact that's not from the living city, it has to, and you want to take it from the realm, it has to be from the realm of life, Gairan. So that's basically all that relevance that has, unless any of you guys can think of anything else.
Nope.
No.
Cool, that's fine. So basically there's only one artifact from Gairan, where before you used to be able to choose like out of a list of 12. So that's why it was it's changed now. And then it goes on to say the city war grove. So a living city can include Sylvaneth units. 1 in every 4 units in the army can be a Sylvaneth unit. Those units gain the cities of Sigmar keyword and the living city keyword. So again, that just explains how we've been talking about how you can involve your Sylvaneth units inside your living city, and then the Stormcast, how do you involve them? Same purpose as well. So
and your Stormcast can count as one of the 4 units to getting your Sylvaneth in.
Yes, so because they have the cities of Sigmar keyword. So I don't like doing maths on the channel because get it wrong. But
in every 4 units, 2 would be
yes,
the Sigmar, 1 could be Stormcast, and 1 could be Sylvaneth.
It can actually be even better than that. It can be 1 can be an ally, 1 could be cities of Sigmar, and so on.
True.
yeah, that's true. So then going on to the Hunters of the Hidden Path, which is very much what we've been talking about with the deep striking. So instead of setting up a living city unit on the battlefield, you can place it to one side and say that is set up on the hidden pass as a reserve unit. You can set up 1 reserve unit on the hidden pass for each living city unit you have set up on the battlefield. At the end of your movement, you can set up 1 or more of these units on the battlefield wholly within 6 inches of the edge of the battlefield and 9 inches away from the enemy units. That's more than 9 inches. Any reserved units on the hidden paths that are not set up on the battlefield before the start of the 4th battle round are destroyed. So you can't leave this as a right at the end of the game, literally turn 5, let's say, where you go, right, not really many things left on the board, on quickly set up, make something move, ridiculous movement, and then take it on objective. So you can't be that gamey with it, but it's still very good for all the reasons we've already mentioned, right?
Well, the whole idea of it is it's meant to be this kind of ambush thing, and you don't ambush at the end of a battle, you ambush at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, like what I say, your guys are very brave, right? They're not just standing there going like, well, we'll turn up if it looks like we're winning. It's not quite like that. Also, what I'd say is something good on this, and we talked a lot about like heavy hitters coming up on the board, but even something you both have used against me, just setting up a unit of 10 handgunners as an example, just to be a pain in the enemy. Just, you know, these little harassing units, shall we say, which is great because you can, let's say on average you have about, I want to say like 10 units in your army, or 8 to 10. That's like at least 4 things you can have in reserve, right? So it's not just your hero, your combat hero, and then your combat unit and nothing else. You can probably have 1 or 2 other harassing units, which I know you, Luke, specifically do with 2 units of handgunners at the moment.
Yeah, Alex and I were discussing this the other day actually, because he was saying how crossbows would work even better, because they have a 24-inch range rather than the 16 of handgunners, so you can bring them in even further away.
Well, there you go, and I really am looking forward to facing that. So that'd be fun, right? I literally, like you, Luke, deployed 2 units of 10 handgunners behind my block of 20 Chaos Warriors and like deleted them in like 2 turns. Like, just I didn't understand Chaos Warriors should be better, but Handgunners, they know what they're doing, so it doesn't always have to be your big combat offensive unit coming in, is what I'm trying to say. So then the next ability is Attuned to Nature. So at the start of your hero phase, you can heal 1 wound allocated to each friendly living city unit, which is good, and I know you've already mentioned that. I think it was Alex who said that. And I think what this is good is if you're coming against armies that do, like, let's say your enemy's army has got an ability or a spell that does mortal wounds to your army board wide by doing like D3 mortal wounds to each one of your units or something like that. You know, wonder who we're talking about.
You're not in any way bitter, are you?
Fun?
You're not in any way bitter about Croak, are you?
Look, when my whole army has like a 5-up spell save and then just like fails all its 5s up for like 5 turns. I mean, Varangard, get a better shield. Steal a Chaos Knight shield, for Christ's sake. Have a 5-up mortal wound save instead. Jesus. Sorry, yeah, I was a little bit annoyed about that. But what it is quite... So, I'll be honest, against Lord Croak, I think you're going to get wiped out quite quickly. But against things like maybe Techless, which is only like one... like I think when he does his big bubble thing of damaging, it's just like, 1d3 or something if you're in range. Or something like... What I'm trying to say, before I get all my rules wrong, is that like the Comet or something that, does mortal wounds to several units. Or, those odd artifacts out there, which is like, once per game, in your movement phase, you can roll a dice, and on a 6, every enemy unit within 6 inches of you takes a mortal wound. All those sort of rules. This is good because it means they can't just slowly kill your whole army at once. As you can hear, alright. So... you've got that, and then you've got the command ability, which is Strike, then Melt Away, which you already mentioned. So you can use this command ability at the end of your shooting phase. If you do so, pick 1 friendly living city unit that's shot in that phase is more than 9 inches from any enemy unit and is wholly within 18 inches of a friendly living city hero. That unit can make a normal move. It cannot run though. A unit cannot benefit from this command ability more than once per phase. That's fine, because otherwise it would just be ridiculous.
You chain it down the entire board from hero to hero.
Yeah. What I would like to say about this, and we haven't mentioned it already, is that because it's wholly within 18 inches, so you have huge range.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely huge. Yeah, like really, really good on that one. So yeah, that's useful. We're not going to talk any more about that because we already have talked about that quite a lot. And then going into like more specific things, so the Living City command trait, so Blessed by the Everqueen. So, command trait number 1, Iron Oak Artisan. So add 1 to save rolls for attacks that target this general. In addition, add 1 to wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by this general. So that's what you gave to your Anointed on Flames by Phoenix, wasn't it?
Oh, it's an amazing command trait. Yeah, really good.
Everyone I know who's ever played Living City takes that.
Yeah.
I've not come across anyone using any of the other ones.
Yeah.
Well,
like the Druid one is good, but which we'll go into in a sec. But yeah, I know Cartisan by a long way, I would say, is the best one.
Well, it's just like +1 to save, great. Also, +1 to wound as well.
Yeah, stop there. Just stop at +1 to save, and I'm taking it.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually quite hard to get +1 to wound. That's like an additional thing. So then the other thing is so number 2. We've got Forest Strider. So this general can run and still charge in the same turn. In addition, friendly units are not affected by the deadly scenery rule if they start a move wholly within 12 inches of this general.
Which is not bad. That's very useful if you're... It's very situational, and the issue is you don't know the situation you're going into when you're creating the army list.
No. All I can say is that when we had so there was a tournament on the Discord on the last Sunday of us recording this, and all 3 of us played, and I didn't see your game, Luke, because obviously I was playing my own, and it was against Alex. And how many times did Deadly come up? Like literally, it devastated your Deepkin army turn 1, right? It's really bad.
Totally.
Like I think it did, like by turn 2, I think it did about 10 mortal wounds on the table in total. Like it was quite.
Yeah. But Forest Strider's only wholly within 12 inches.
Yeah.
Of your general, so it's pretty limited.
It's limited, and that's only because we're playing in the realm of beasts, right? And what I will say is, unless you're Ravengers or maybe something else out there, being living cities, you only get one command trait. It's not an artifact. It's not like I've already got the Iron Oak Artisan, what else do I take? It's this or that. And then the next one, which we'll get onto in a second. So when there's one that's evidently better than the rest of them, there's like no real reason to take the others.
For sure.
So then the next one, the third and final one, which is Druid of the Everspring Circle. If the general is a wizard, they know all spells from the Law of Leaves instead of only one. If this general is not a wizard, they know one spell from the Law of Leaves and can attempt to cast it in their hero phase. So the reason why I'd say I'd look at this is if you haven't really gone for any heroes you want to get in combat in your army, if you just try to go for ones that just give you buffs or something else, and for some reason you also don't have a wizard, it's quite good just to make sure you get that wizard. But even if you have one, you're giving them access to all the spells. So I'd probably say it's the second best one in my opinion.
It is good. Like, don't get me wrong, it's good. Like the spell lore for Living City is actually really good. Like, all three spells, I generally take three wizards and I take all three spells. So like it is good. When you're comparing it to Iron Oak Artisan, it just doesn't quite match up.
Yeah, but I think I absolutely agree. And the only situation I said like you would use it is if you don't want to go for a hero that's going to be in danger's way or fighting himself.
But even then, if you've got that situation where you've got a hero who's going to be your general who you don't want to be hitting, then surely taking a command trait that's going to give them +1 to their save, so if someone does get to you, is going to be more useful.
Luke, I'm trying to be respectful to the druids out there. Just, come on, shower little god. No, okay, yeah, I agree. The Iron Oak Artisan, from what I'm hearing by reading the first, if you include the number 1 as a word, the first 4 words practically at that point.
Yeah.
Add 1 to save. I don't even need the rolls bit there. So that's our favourite. And then going on to the artifacts. So again, if you've got a battalion, you can take more than one. We'll get to that in a moment though, so don't worry. All I'm going to say is, picture yourself only taking one of these. So the first one is Spear of the Hunt. So pick one of the bearer's melee weapons. Improve the ring characteristic of that weapon by 1. In addition, the bearer and their mount fight at the start of the combat phase. If they made a charge move in the same turn, the bearer cannot fight again in that combat phase unless an ability or spell allows them to fight more than once. Can I just say something? Maybe, why didn't they put the Spear of the Hunt, maybe artifact number 2? Why have they made the first 2 ones in both the command traits and artifacts the best ones?
Oh, I don't know. There's definitely, depending on your build, the Deepmire Cloak has some real use.
Oh, okay.
Especially with the meta at the moment. I like Spear of Hunt's what I use, but I have used Deepmire Cloak as well with some different lists.
The Deepmire Cloak on Dreichter, actually.
She's a named character.
Oh, she is, isn't she? Yeah.
I'll tell you what. So I'll just say the Spear of the Hunt, generally good, right? Because with your general who's got this, he's probably came on from the board edge and charging automatically. So, right, like I don't feel like we need to go too much detail of that. I'm putting this down as the best one, and then when we read the rest, we can try and change our minds. Because Spear of the Hunt, you can just read it and see it's good. So number 2, Deepmire Cloak. So if the bearer has a wound characteristic of 6 or less while they are in cover, the bearer cannot be chosen to be a target of a missile weapon. If the bearer has a wound characteristic of 7 or more while they are in cover, subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made with missile weapons that target the bearer. Okay, so that means that if you're not a monster as well, you can be -2 from shooting, or if you're obviously less.
Which means you can't. It just means you can't. Well, yeah, it means you can't be shot for your small heroes, which is great.
Yeah, that is good.
And like generally, the way that the city's heroes play, that like the little foot heroes, you're rarely getting them into combat unless it's desperate times. So normally they're sat behind, your big block of whatever buffing. So putting the Spear of the Hunt on them doesn't really make sense. Whereas, the Deep Mire Cloak, especially with how much shooting there is around at the moment, it's really good. Just being able to pop them in a bit of cover and be like, nope, you can't do that.
Yeah.
I'm debating switching it up to that actually right now. I tend to take Spear of the Hunt, but I have an Anointed on foot, so I am debating whether I should probably switch.
Right. I'll just say, so like for yourself, Luke, because you're like heavy hitting hero that comes on is a Surston Prime, as an example. He's not taking an artifact because he's a named character. So then it makes interesting conversation, which is something that Alex has brought up here, but suggesting the cloak, because if you haven't got that heavy hitting hero, you don't really want to give anyone the Spear of the Hunt. It's like I don't know, it's different subject, but in my Archaon list, the only one who can take an artifact is my Chaos Lord on foot, and because he's only there to make Archaon fight twice, basically, he can't take an artifact from his sub-legions because he doesn't have any. But when I look at the realms, I just go Shaiish to give him save rolls of 1, because this guy, I'm not prioritising him fighting, so I might as well just try and keep him alive because he's a buff piece. And it's the same with your buff pieces in Living Cities. There's no point making their combat prowess better. You might as well just try and keep them alive. Most tables have enough scenery pieces on board for you to tag him on a little bit of scenery. If he's only got like a 32mm base or 40mm base, it doesn't need much scenery to get on for that. So
I mean, the little cities ones are on 25s. They're tiny.
Oh wow, yeah, that's really good. Then. Like really good. Well, we'll read the last one then. So, Wardroth Horn, I believe it is Wardroth Horn.
Wardroth. Yeah.
Cool. Once per battle in your hero phase, the bearer can sound the Wardroth Horn. If they do so until the start of your next hero phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of melee weapons used by Living City Sylvaneth units. So, firstly, I was going, oh, that's really good. Why haven't we mentioned that? But because it's Sylvaneth, do you tend not to use Sylvaneth as your combat offensive units then? And is that why we haven't really mentioned this? Or are you going to tell me you actually quite like it?
So there's a few that can work. So the Spirit of Durthu is good because he's got his shooting attack, so he can deep strike, shoot, and move. Often the issue is he's still only got like a 5-inch movement or something. So even then, he's still often needing quite a bit of a charge if your opponent's clever and like doesn't sort of go right up to the board edge. But it could work for him. Colonel Hunters, like as I understand it with Sylvaneth, they can be pretty good because they can go through the wildwoods and stuff like that. Whereas if you have like, to make this artifact worthwhile, you'd have to say take 6 Colonel Hunters with scythes.
Yeah.
The moment you cannot come up against with anyone with good magic or good missile attacks, by the time they've plodded their way up the board on turn 2, turn 3, they're like completely decimated. So yeah, like you do see 6 blocks in cities in Living City, and in that instance, probably worth it. But it's not, competitively, it's not the best build taking that many Kurnoth in Living City.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because they're not so fast, are they? I know Kurnoth Hunters, they're not the slowest thing in the world, but certainly not the fastest with that extra movement. It means you're not guaranteeing those charges, pretty much. So,
exactly, like you can deep strike them, but it's a 9-inch charge, which, as I talked about earlier, most of the time you're not making those.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Because then obviously you could go, well, I'm going to give them bows, and then they can shoot, and then they can move forward, and then attack. But if they've got bows, they don't want to fight in combat. Is there anything else you want to add to that, Luke, or you think that's pretty much?
No. I think that's been covered.
Cool. Well, I'd say that if you love Sylvaneth stuff, try and have some fun.
Yeah.
So going on to the Living City spell laws. So the Law of Leaves. So Life Surge. Life Surge has casting value of 6. Is successfully cast, pick 1 friendly model within 18 inches of the caster that is visible to them. You can heal up to D6 wounds allocated to that model. I'm just going to say flat out, I'll read the other ones and see, but that just seems like a pretty solid take.
The only, the
Yeah,
only-
I mean
Sorry,
it's
go on.
good. It's good, absolutely. But the other two are really good as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
And
Well,
it
that's
does
good.
it does have the drawback of it being the model rather than the unit.
Yeah, you
So
can't heal D6 wounds worth of models to a unit.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true. So going on to the next one, Cage of Thorns. Cage of Thorns cast on value 7. If successfully cast, pick one enemy unit within 18 inches of the caster that is visible to them. Half the move cash. Okay, yeah, I like this one. Off that unit until the start of your next hero phase. In addition, until the start of your next hero phase, the first time that unit moves, it suffers D6. Whoa.
yep.
I'll be
It's a
honest.
good one.
There's a few things in here I've read where it's like they can just stop after the first thing. I'm not saying it's too powerful, but just like, whoa, it was pretty good already. And then yeah, I like that. That's solid. What I will say though, quickly on that, cast of A7. Are there many inherent ways in your army to get pluses to cast?
Yeah. So you've got the Celestial Hurricanum, which gives Collegiate Arcanum wizards +1 to cast. You've got the Sorceress, who can sacrifice a poor Dark Elf and get +2 to cast. They're the two main ways in Living City, anyway.
yeah.
That's a really good spell, isn't it?
Yep.
That's really good.
Slightly high casting value on a 7. But it is a really good spell, so it's worth the 7.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, D6 more wounds as well. That's nice. Okay, and then the last one is Iron Oak Skin. So Iron Oak Skin is cast on base 6. Is successfully cast. Pick one friendly unit wholly within 18 inches of the caster that is visible to them, and subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks that target that unit until the start of your next hero phase. I know you've done this against me, Alex, where scenario your Phoenix, my Vanguard, and my Vanguard will then -1 to wound. So like, yeah, it's pretty solid. Especially if you're like my Vanguard are wounded on 2s, right? But if I'm wounded on, let's say the average, probably 4s, then wounded on 5s, pretty.
It hurts.
Yeah, like that's really gonna. And Castaway
Yeah.
6 is all right. I can
Exactly.
I can see why you try and take 3 wizards to field each one of these. I'd say the 2 best ones are the second and third.
Exactly. You thought the first one was really good, and it
Yeah,
just gets
like
better.
straight away. And then like, wow, actually, for Cage of Thorns, I like that. I'm not gonna lie, that's that out of like, because I already knew a lot about the other rules for the Living City. Sort of things I've learned by doing this video is that's the one thing that's made me go, actually, kind of want to do this army.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's an awesome.
And they've got a really nice, and the 3 spells have like a really nice synergy in like the way for me that I play them. So I run a big block of Phoenix Guard. If I can Iron Oak Skin them with like a little wizard set behind, they're going to be 4 up, -1 to wound. Great, even harder to kill. That spell also obviously buffs up my Phoenix if the Phoenix is nearby, giving it +1 to save.
Yeah.
With my Drycha, I shoot with her and then I run away. If I can also cast a spell onto that unit to make half their movement, that's even harder for them to catch up with her and get to her. So that's really good from her. And then normally I will have like a Celestial Hurricanum coming in from the sideboard. And if that has Life Surge on it, it's just kind of sat there. It can heal itself. It can heal Drycha. My Phoenix can fly over to it and get healed by that. It's just kind of a bit of a stopping station for anything to heal up before going back into the melee.
Yeah. So it just works really well. And nice ranges on these spells as well, I will say.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm thinking about, I know something that you've started playing recently, Alex, that'll be fresh on your mind. The Slaves to Darkness spells, which has got a good spell lore, but practically all 12-inch range. So the 18-inch range here really does make a difference, because I know they have one to muck up the enemy's movement there. You have one to do that here, but 18-inch, which is great, because as good as your battle mages are, and especially when you cast endless spells, let's say in this army, you get the special effect. You play the endless spell as if it was from the realm it's from, so you maximizes it. Your casters aren't the most how do I say it? Strongest when it comes to defense. So the fact that you can have your casters not too close to the enemy when he's getting these spells off, that's pretty solid. And I know you can have Stormcast Wizards and everything else if you want that, but it means that your guys are quite more protected.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is cool. So that is the rules for the Living Cities. Just want to quickly mention their battalion. So we'll quickly go through it. It's I have already got my own sort of opinions on this battalion, and I have a feeling that some of you may already have your own feelings as well on it. But we'll read it, right? We'll read it. So it is the Veridane Pathfinders.
Viridian?
Viridian? Viridian sounds, that sounds better. Viridian Pathfinders. So 1 Living City Nomad Prince, 3 units of Living City Wildwood Rangers, and 0 to 1 units of Living City Wildwood Riders. I think they used to be called. I'm mixing up, I know. Wild Riders. Okay, that's fine. I've recorded a lot of videos today. So, going on to the abilities, we've got Masters of Ambush. So, striking from quarters unseen, these warriors are miss their foes with blades swirling before the enemy even realizes their doom. Add 1 to the charge rolls of friendly units from this battalion if they use the Hunters of the Hidden Paths battle trait to set up on the battlefield in the same turn. So, the question I've got to yourself, Luke, and yourself, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Is this kind of like, oh my god, where have I been going wrong all my life? I've seen this battalion. Now, I'm throw your old list book away for Living Cities. Is this now what you're going to build your whole army around? What are your thoughts?
Not a chance.
No, yeah.
You can take a battalion can be great for lowering your drops and getting that extra artifact if it's units you want to take. But if you're going Wood Elf focused infantry, you're probably going Eternal Guard, not Wildwood Rangers. And Wildwood Riders, they're speedy, but they die to a stiff breeze. So it's not units you're going to be taking. Yeah. The ability is, with their +1 to charge innately, it's still a 7-inch charge off the side. It's still not good.
Particularly as none of those units actually have a ranged ability, so you can't even use the command trait.
Yeah.
No.
So just to say now, we're just talking about Living Cities, but to broaden out to Cities of Sigmar, the problem I have is that all the battalions aren't bad, right? They're not all bad. The Living City one isn't good. And it's almost like they've looked at these battalions and they've gone, even just the Living City one actually, we'll just talk about that. They've gone, this is really cool narrative, right? This fits the whole Wood Elf aesthetic. This is what players want. We'll do this. We'll include Wood Elf units. We'll make it really sort of like thematic. And then, what about its abilities? Well, we won't make its abilities worth taking. That's not why people are going to take this. They're going to take it because they just they like those units.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It makes me really sad. The same world that Change Host exists, right?
Exactly. You look at the other books around that time, and you've got Change Host with Tzeentch, the Slaves to Darkness ones, which came out at a similar time, are really good. The Iron Jaws ones, which came out at a similar time, are really good. And then you've got cities.
Sorry, go
on. You've got the cities ones, and there's a couple which are decent, but they're just so strict, and it makes me sad.
I'd have liked it to have included some, an element of Sylvaneth or something to really entice you, sort of, to try and build that. Even if they're trying to go down that narrative route and make you want to build the narrative army, then include something from the Sylvaneth army to,
definitely
make you try and go down that route. The Tempest, I know, sort of sidetracking slightly, but the Tempest I won, you take some Karakon overlords in that battalion. So, if they're trying to push that narrative aspect of when you're building your army, encourage me to want to take the stuff that makes the Living City what it is.
Agreed. And also, I'd like to take those units if they were good, right? It's not hate Wilder Rangers. Why? Just don't like the concept. They're awesome,
Oh,
right? They hunt down the monstrous creatures of the wildwood, without butchering the law too much. Um, they're really, really cool things. Make their rules better. The other thing with Cities of Sigmar, it's like there's so many other cool units in here, and if Games Workshop made their rules better, they would sell them. Like it. So it's a shame that they've given the War Scroll Battalion for the Living City has to include units that you weren't going to include in your army, which is a shame, right? And even if you do take it, you're not making the most out of what it wants you to make the most of, which is coming from the hidden paths. The other thing I will say is that with Living Cities, now you may look if you look at the book, you'll go, oh, well, there's 7 battalions here. Each battalion is locked into its city, so you only get 1 per city.
Yeah. Yeah, you have an entire city that's based around movement and sort of shooting and running away, and you've made the battalion with 1 unit that has movement, but as Alex says, dice twist with threes, and none of the units have any shooting ability.
Well, hang on. There's the Nomad Prince has a bird attack, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. What is that? A 6-inch bird attack?
I'm pretty sure that's an ability, not an attack. Just going to put it out
It used to be
there.
an attack. I want to look it up. Hang on. While we're doing this,
He's at the back. He's at the back somewhere.
is it the back? God, it's such a big book. I mean, this is like what in a YP video. The book is too big.
It's an ability. So it's not even a shooting attack.
But you can make the enemy -1 hit by picking out their eyes. So yeah, I really feel like they need to. If someone said to me like, "Oh, what's something they could do to improve the game mechanics of Age of Sigmar?" Because I think it's a very good game, I would go even out battalions. Because either you have battalions that are just terrible, not worth taking, which are the ones that I'm used to, or just very, very, very powerful. So, and that's all the like rules that you'll see come up on the screen for this video. So the last thing I want to say to you guys is, in a summary, now that we've looked at, because to be fair, we looked at a bit of the weaknesses and stuff as well. So why would you play this army over another army? And as you both have faced that question you had in your own head when you asked yourself, should I do this army? What made you choose this army? The Living City.
Ooh, I'll go.
Yeah.
Firstly, the range of models. If we're going from a hobby aspect, the Sylvaneth models are beautiful. I love it. In terms of a game aspect, I mean, Cities of Sigmar as a whole, I love. We've talked about the size of the book. The level of list building that you can do with cities is probably like no other book out there. I've probably done 70 different versions of my Living City list. I'm still not set on what exactly I think is my best one. And then, so there's that, which I love. And then in terms of how it plays, it's kind of, as I mentioned at the start, no 2 games are the same. There's like a very generic Tempest Eye list, for example, in cities is Soul Screen Bridge, 30 Iron Drakes, you teleport them forwards, you blast everything away. Whereas you never know what you're going to be doing in a game of Living City, really. It's all where your opponent is, and then you put your stuff, where it needs to be, and it's all about, drawing your enemy where you want them to be. So it's much more, it's a lot of thinking. It's a lot more difficult, but really rewarding when it goes well. Because, it's great. I love it.
Awesome. Brilliant.
Yeah.
And Luke, yourself?
I think Alex has sort of touched on all the main points there. It's the idea of the fluidity of the army, of no 2 games you play are ever going to be the same. And you may have sort of a rough template of how you're going to bring your force, and you sort of have a rough idea of how you want to do things. But touching back on what was said earlier, is the fact that your entire army is all based on reaction. What's happening on the board, and what can you do to undo it? Whereas, rather than in an army of, well, I'm here to do this, I'm going to do that. I think that's just the really fun side of it all. I think that's the main point, really. It's a fun army to play and a fun city to play the army with. You're getting to use sort of the best of what's available to you in such a different way. I think that's the best way to describe it.
I think it's good. I think it's good that you say, like, you're very You're very good at reacting to the enemy. It's almost like your killing stuff that's off the board. It's a bit like a predator drone, in the sky, delivering, swift justice to anyone who deserves it on the board. You've got that going on. And then the other thing is, I would say, like, for myself, when I said, like, I really like, wood elves and stuff, and I know wood elves aren't a thing anymore, and, that's fine. But you've got the Wanderers and you've got the Sylvaneth, right? And if you looked at the Sylvaneth and you go, I just wish they were a bit more elfy, as an example, which I've heard people say that to me before. Living cities, you can have both. And I know we've sort of, like, shied away from some of the Sylvaneth units, and we've shied away like from some of the Wanderer units, especially when we talked about, like, the Wanderer Battalion. That's basically what it is. It's a Wanderer Battalion, not a Living City Battalion. But that doesn't mean you can't play it, right? We're used to playing against some of the stronger armies out there. So the reason why we automatically take, a competitive standstill on our sort of thought process of this, but like I said at the start, play whatever models you want, right? But I think the biggest thing to take away from the Living City, and something can be said a lot for just the Cities of Sigmar as a general, is the amount of options you have can be to the point where it can be a little bit off-putting. Because you could look at another army and you could go, right, there's like 5 ways to play this army, basically. There's 5 different things I can do to play it. And then you look at Living Cities and you go, I don't even know how many numbers there are. I mean, how many different ways you could play it. But it means you're getting so much good value for your army. And because none of your 2 games are the same, you're not getting that mundane experience like I mentioned at the start of this video. And you're really just making yourself keep on being excited by your army's playstyle, right? And how you can change your army up, which makes it a really good value army. So it's a good investment to make in that point. As an outsider point of view, that's sort of what I'm thinking and how I'm picking up on the vibe. And also, you love Wood Elves, play this army. It's the closest thing you're going to get to it. So, with that, has anyone got any other closing statements?
No, I don't think so.
Fantastic. The only thing I want to say about why I play the Living Cities is going to be the same for all the Cities of Sigmar when I do why plays for them, and that is it's important reviewing these cities because, unlike some of the other books, if you go Cities of Sigmar, obviously you can change your lists up and stuff, but you have to pick a city. There's no generic command traits. There's no generic artifacts. You have to pick one. It's not like Fleshy Courts where if you don't pick one of the Grand Courts, just go one of the Grand Illusions and then you have lots of flexibility. So it's more important to know which city you want to choose, but then, as always, you can change things up. You can modify your army and convert your army so it's a Living City army, but then play it as Hammerhall, if you just want to have a change up. So you've got all that flexibility there. So what I will say to everyone who's watching this video is if you've got any more questions or anything like that, please put them in the comments down below and I'll try and help you best I can. And there's also anything that you guys out there who are watching this, you thought, obviously you thought you agreed with something we said, it's always nice to hear that, but if there's anything you thought that you disagreed, and really just anything you can add to the conversation, let us know that in the comments as well, as we're all here to learn, right? And the more we learn together, the more our games are improved, essentially. So it'd be great to hear that as well. If you did enjoy this video, I'd ask you please to smash that like button, that subscribe button, and make sure you hit that bell notification if you haven't already, as that's absolutely free for you guys to do, but it really does help the channel. And you know what, if you found this video useful, make sure you go and share it with someone else who you think might as well, because then we can all, like I say, improve our gameplay. What I'd also like to do as well is do a shout out to my patrons. So this is going to be to my Morgasts, which is Sandback, Johnathan H, Philco, and my vampires, which is Mir, Martinez, Rouse321, Max T, David A, and my necromancers, of course, Jacq.l, RadiationRiley, AW77, Dice Sagas, WolfNick, Michal W, and Quad. Guys, like I say, wouldn't be able to do this without you. Thank you so much for your continued support. It really does make a huge difference, even just to my motivation towards doing the channel. I really do appreciate it. And what I would also like to say is, if you'd like to become a patron, like I mentioned at the start of the video, there'll be a link to my Patreon at the top of the description down below, and even if you just consider it, that'd be absolutely great. But anyway, with that aside, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone watching this. A special thank you to Luc and Alex as well for joining me on here. It's been great having you on the video as well and hearing your thoughts on the channel, and I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, been a pleasure, man.
Fantastic. So everyone who's watching this, thank you very much for watching. Remember until next time to stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask for God's sake, stay hygienic so we can all start gaming again. It's fine for you guys down in New Zealand, but honestly I'm jealous. It's all hell for you guys really. But anyway, more importantly than all of this, remember until next time that Nagash is all and all is one in Nagash.